Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Today, Daniel McAdams with me, co-host. Good to see you, Daniel.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul.
Good. There was a campaign going on, I guess you noticed.
I did notice that.
And I, of course, think it's a distraction from important things. And that's why we're talking about something that we think might be more important. I've kidded about, the politicians are fiddling and the Middle East is burning. So we wanted to talk about that because obviously there's a lot of activity going on and something changed. Of course, we've talked a lot about Aleppo, and we've talked a little bit about Raqqa. We know that's the so-called capital for ISIS. And then we've also talked about Mosul because there's a battle going on. But all of a sudden this weekend, the United States decided to become more aggressive. Of course, no boots on the ground. We're not really involved. Our airplanes are involved. The boots on the ground are involved, and I think maybe later we might even have a picture showing U.S. troops there. Yeah. And there's a lot of activity going on. So, yes, the politicians are fiddling because they're not talking about what's going on over there and the potential danger that exists. And I know you have an opinion about really what's going on and what this might lead to. But where do you see the greatest danger with what is happening here? Maybe this will just blow over. Mm-hmm. You think about, when Hillary was involved with, Libya, that thing didn't blow over, it blew up in her face. And there may be some similarities here, but will they be any more successful, or could this blow up and turn into a fiasco?
Yeah, I think this is the real November surprise, and it's so surprising that nobody's even noticing, which is that the U.S., along with the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, which are about 90% Kurdish troops, have started an operation to take Raqqa in Syria to overthrow the ISIS rule in Raqqa. And it started today. I think the U.S. has taken 16 airstrikes around in the region. And I think it's been a surprise. I think the Russians were caught off guard. And you're right to bring up Syria, because I think what's happening in Raqqa is that the U.S. is going to turn that into Syria's Benghazi. They're going to take it from ISIS. They're going to put in a government there, and they're going to recognize that as the legitimate government of Syria and build up an army, et cetera, and use that as a real government, just like they did in Libya. Probably the results ultimately be about the same.
As we get started, let's get the map up there to refresh everybody's memory and the positions of these three cities now that are more in the news. That we see Aleppo up there in the left corner, and 300 miles to the east, Raqqa, which is now more in the news, and of course, not too far from Mosul, which is obviously in very northern part of Iraq. And that, of course, there's an attack going on there. But it's all one battle in many ways. It's the factions that hate Assad, and it's a battle against Assad, and it's a battle against Russia, because Russia is an ally. And now it's getting much trickier because, we're bombing up there now, and it sort of puts a handicap on Russia, what they can do. I can't see this leading, even though it seems to be a plus right now for the Allied forces on what they're doing. I just don't think that the Russians and Assad are going to go away quietly. I think Russia has a big stake in Syria. I think they have a big stake in that naval base. And if they were caught by surprise, they might just sit back and think about this for a while, because there's always another day to fight. But I think it's interesting about the Kurds being involved. We want to talk about that for a minute. The Kurds are involved. They're attacking along with our allies there, plus our troops. And yet Turkey's saying, no way you can't come in here. And the Kurds say to the Turks, no way you're going to participate here. So are the Turks going to march in and participate in it and manage it? Evidently not so. I mean, I think they're trying to work who gets to divvy up the city. Yeah. And it looks like, the U.S. and its allies want to, deal with Turkey, which they must. And that then, to me, raises questions. what are the Kurds going to do? Are they going to get a couple oil wells for this? And even if they don't march down the streets of Raqqa, they're still investing time, money, lives, and all this. So that seems to me perplexing. I told you a little while ago, non-intervention is so much easier to understand. It's so much more beneficial, but sorting all this out is what we have to do because we have to contend with it, then anticipate what the politicians are going to do. And you've even indicated this might be a de facto, no-fly zone. And of course, we talked about how dangerous a no-fly zone is, but this is sort of twisted on us. We're sort of in the driver's seat right now, teasing the Russians to do something about these bombers.
Yeah, the ball is in their court. The Russians, what are they going to do? Shoot down F-16s in eastern Syria? It's not going to happen. So it is a de facto no-fly zone in East Syria. But, the point you make about the Turks is very interesting, and I think President Obama recognized this problem because he sent the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, to Turkey over the weekend, just as this was starting. He met with his counterpart in Turkey, their Joint Chiefs chairman, the equivalent, and they got together and they made an agreement. And it's clear as mud. Here's what they said. Here's what Dunford said after meeting with his Turkish counterpart. The coalition, i.e. the U.S. and its allies, will work together on the long-term plan for seizing, holding, and governing Raqqa, which is interesting because it's in Syria. So essentially they're saying we are taking this territory. But he also said, we always knew that the SDF, which is the Kurdish group, wasn't the solution for holding and governing Raqqa. So it seems to me from reading what has been said that the U.S. is going to use the Kurds to bombard, to attack Raqqa, and then at some point believes that it will pull them back and send in, as Dunford said, the Free Syrian Army and the moderate forces to do the final coup de grace in Raqqa. It sounds pretty far-fetched.
It sounds to me like there's a lot of room for this stuff to go awry and not work quite like this. Others have suggested, and this is always possible, election time, nobody's looking, and if there looks like a military success, it might be designed, to help Hillary. They do things like that. And also, it might have been, strategically a race to beat the Russians, because the Russians obviously wanted to take that city as well. But it looks like there's a lot of motivations involved here. But I think there's a lot of room for things to go wrong on this, and this is not the end. They're not going to, we were able to chase out ISIS out of Mosul and then out of Raqqa. But even if they did that, even if we have a surprise military victory that we have Obama delivering this new standing, to Hillary to manage. I'll tell you what, that to me, the powder keg is getting bigger. I don't think the factions aren't going to melt away and say, well, this is an unconditional surrender. There's nothing going to be like that. There's unconditional chaos is what I see here. And I think you mentioned, at least in conversation, that this is escalation for us. This is definitely escalation. We're digging a bigger hole for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think, the Russians are kind of ground down in Aleppo. They've halted their assault on the al-Qaeda-held East Aleppo. And I think what happened is there was so much international media pressure. The Russians are essentially doing in Aleppo what the U.S. is doing in Mosul, which is trying to free the city from its being held by terrorists. But the media attention on Aleppo has been so strong, I think it frightened the Russians. I think the Russians have pulled back. They haven't done any military action there in several days, a couple of weeks at least. And so I think the U.S. has used the Russian pause to get very aggressive in eastern Syria.
Well, once again, there's a contradiction of the official position of our government. Few advisors over there, no ground troops, no boots on the ground. But evidently there is the concrete evidence, and there was a former member of the Pentagon that has been telling us that there's no way we don't have troops there, very, very much involved. And, occasionally they're going to get killed. And if it escalates even more, I don't think they're going to want to have a Benghazi. You know, if there's a threat that we're getting wiped out there, I think we're going to have more troops in there because they've gone through this failure at Benghazi. They didn't learn a lesson. You'd think, well, you know, that didn't work so well. In Libya, maybe the same policy is not the best thing to pursue here. And besides, the Russians are there, which is another unknown, another card to be played, and it's that much more dangerous.
And the Russians are pretty invested so far. They've been very involved. They spent a lot of money. They've put themselves on the line. So what will Russia do if the U.S. sets up a rival government in East Syria? But, you know, the other thing we talked about before we came on is the Iran question. I think that's a central question because if the U.S. sets up a rival government in eastern Syria, that is going to really block Iran's way not only to help Assad in western Syria, but also to help the Hezbollah in Lebanon. I think that's a long-term goal of Israel, and I think that's another factor that you have to consider in this U.S. move.
Yeah, Israel's been rather quiet. They haven't been complaining too much about what's been going on here, and that, of course, is a major future problem, I believe. It's not going to go away either.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the media is as they did with Mosul, the media is portraying this attack on Raqqa. I saw a thing today, it's the capital of international terrorism, which is sort of funny anyway, because ISIS is unlike Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is sort of the Trotsky of the jihadist movement. They want a worldwide jihadist movement. ISIS has never been about that. They've been about setting up their caliphate in a specific geographic territory and working from there. So, but the media, of course, is
we have the factor of the election coming up. Yeah. What will one candidate do versus the other candidate? And, you know, it's interesting. There's lots of ups and downs in a campaign. There for a while, it was Hillary. Then all of a sudden, Trump gets a big boost from Comey.
Yeah.
And that is a flip-up. I don't think there's ever been an election where the guy that's running the FBI, Comey, has so much authority. He can change his campaign around. And the big question is, we have a pretty good idea of the mistakes that Hillary will make. We have no idea exactly what Trump will make. We hope that, you know, his intuitions, which have been good on some occasion, would prevail. But then he has other two intuitions that he ain't going to get shoved around.
Yeah, he's been very unequivocal in his position on Iran. And so if he's told that this move in eastern Syria is going to wrong-foot Iran, he may well go for it just like Hillary will.
Yeah, and that's one thing they have to have to contend with. But I think the election is playing a role in it. That's not the major thing. What's really playing a role in this is our perpetual interventionist foreign policy. It's been going on way too long. It's ending. We're getting near the end stages of this because it's not doable. It's not durable. We can't afford it, and we have consequences that aren't good for us, and we will have to give up on it. So we're seeing the complexity of it all, and we saw the escalation here this past weekend. But to me, it doesn't give us more answers. That gives us more questions and more difficulty on figuring out what will happen. And then right in the midst of an election, people are trying to figure out, you know, it's amazing. 8 straight days, the stock market's down sharply because it looked like, Trump was going to win. And then all of a sudden, there's a new announcement by Comey, and it looks like Hillary would win. Wall Street loves it. Our buddies on Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, they love this stuff, which is so discouraging to think that there can be such a positive market approach. You know, they're supposed to represent the marketplace, but they're not. They're representing a system of government called, interventionism, and it is far cry from, it's a far cry from anything called free markets, and especially when you see Hillary saying, you know, if you wanted to deal with this problem, I think you have to deal with something I've talked about. You have to deal with the Federal Reserve that does all the financing of that. But Hillary, chided Trump for even suggesting maybe the Federal Reserve could be criticized. No, my goodness, no, you never criticize the Federal Reserve. So it looks like now people are assuming she's going to win tomorrow. Well, it looks like it might be a victory once again for the Federal Reserve and the deep state. Because here it is, we have people in this country politically and our campaigns going on, and it looks like this is the important thing. No, what's really important is the deep state, whether it's the financial or our foreign policy and all the intrigue of what we're doing over there and all the conniving and the bargains that are made and why we're involved so much in what we've been doing for 25 years in the Middle East, and it's perpetual. But that's driven by the deep state, and that's driven by the shadow government. And what we hear about in this campaign, that is all fluff. And it's very difficult, of course, for the American people to figure out what to anticipate, because the truth of the matter is so often hidden from the American people. Let's hope we're able to continue to contribute to getting the truth out about what's happening, because that's the only thing that really counts. Ideas are important, and good ideas will change things, and they are more powerful than the military, more powerful than the armies, and ideas will spread. They cannot be stopped. So let us continue to promote the ideas of liberty and peace. That's the only thing worth working for. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.